Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny from Into English podcast. Welcome to our new episode. Have you ever felt like your body is tired, but your mind just refuses to stop? You lie in bed, eyes closed, but your thoughts keep replaying the same conversation, the same decision, the same worry, again and again. And the strange thing is, you're not even solving anything. You're just stuck there. Today, we're going to talk about something very common, but also very misunderstood: overthinking. Not just what it is, but why it happens, and more importantly, how you can actually stop it in a realistic way. Because most advice out there sounds nice, but when you're really in that loop, it doesn't work. So, in this episode, I want to give you something more practical, something you can actually use in your daily life. Let's start with a simple question. How do you know that you're overthinking? Because thinking itself is not a bad thing. In fact, thinking is useful. It helps you solve problems, plan your future, and make better decisions. But overthinking feels very different. It usually sounds like this. You go over the same situation again and again. You replay what someone said. You imagine different outcomes. You question your choices. And somehow, after all that thinking, you still don't feel clear. You don't feel better. You just feel more tired. That's the key difference. Normal thinking moves you forward. Overthinking keeps you in the same place, just with more noise. It's like running on a treadmill. You're putting in effort, but you're not actually going anywhere. And here's something important that many people don't realize. Overthinking is not about thinking too much. It's about thinking in a loop with no exit. You're not exploring new ideas. You're just revisiting the same ones from slightly different angles. And because your brain is active, it feels like you're doing something productive. But in reality, nothing is changing. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you need to make a decision, maybe about your career or something smaller like sending an important message. You think about it once, that's normal. You think about it twice, still fine. But then you keep going. What if this is the wrong choice? What if they misunderstand me? What if I regret this later? And suddenly, one small decision becomes 10 different worries. At that point, you're no longer making a decision, you're just trying to avoid discomfort. And that's where overthinking begins. It's not about finding the best answer, it's about trying to eliminate all uncertainty. But here's the problem: that kind of certainty doesn't exist. So the more you search for it, the longer you stay stuck. And maybe, if you listen carefully to your own thoughts, you'll notice something. You're not actually asking new questions. You're asking the same question again and again, just in different forms. And your brain keeps trying to answer it, even when there is no clear answer. That's why it feels exhausting, because your mind is working but not resting. So if there's one thing I want you to take from this first part, it's this. Overthinking is not a sign that you need to think better. It's a sign that you need to stop the loop. And in the next part, we're going to explore something even more interesting: why your brain keeps creating that loop even when it makes you feel worse. Now, here's something interesting. If overthinking makes you feel worse, why does your brain keep doing it? It doesn't feel logical, but it actually is. Because your brain is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you safe. And safety, in the brain's language, often means one thing: certainty. When something feels unclear, uncertain, or slightly risky, your brain tries to solve it by thinking more. It assumes that if it can just analyze the situation a bit deeper, look at it from one more angle, or imagine a few more outcomes, it will eventually find the right answer. But here's where things start to go wrong. Not all problems in life have clear answers. And when your brain faces a situation like that, it doesn't stop. It keeps searching because stopping feels like giving up control. This is where a pattern called rumination begins. Rumination is when your mind keeps returning to the same thought, the same memory, or the same worry, not to understand it better, but to try to feel in control of it. And the tricky part is, it feels useful. It feels like you are being careful, like you are being responsible. But in reality, you are just circling the same point without moving forward. There's also something happening in your brain when you're not focused on a task. When you're lying in bed, taking a shower, or just sitting quietly, your brain activates what scientists call a default mode. This is when your mind starts wandering naturally. It drifts into memories, imagined scenarios, and self-reflection. And if your emotional state is slightly negative, this wandering can quickly turn into overthinking. One thought leads to another, and before you notice it, you're deep inside a chain of worries. It doesn't happen all at once, it builds gradually. That's why overthinking often feels like something you fall into, rather than something you choose. And here's the most important insight in this part. Your brain is not trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you, but using a strategy that doesn't work very well in modern life. Because today, most of the things you overthink are not life-threatening. They're social situations, personal decisions, future uncertainties, things that cannot be solved just by thinking harder. So the next time you catch yourself overthinking, instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" try asking a different question. What is my brain trying to protect me from right now? That question alone can change how you see the entire experience. Now, let's talk about something people don't often notice, the real cost of overthinking. Because on the surface, it doesn't look harmful. You're just sitting there thinking. But internally, a lot is happening. First, overthinking drains your mental energy much faster than you realize. Every time you go back and forth between options, every time you replay a situation, your brain is using energy to simulate outcomes that may never even happen. And over time, this leads to something called decision fatigue. You feel tired, even when you haven't done much physically. Simple choices start to feel heavy. Even small tasks become harder to start. And this leads to the second cost, delay. When you overthink, you don't move. You wait until you feel ready, until you feel sure, until everything makes sense. But that moment rarely comes. So instead of making progress, you stay in the same place, thinking about moving forward. And sometimes the opportunity quietly passes, not because you made the wrong decision, but because you didn't make any decision at all. There's also an emotional cost. The more you overthink, the more you focus on what could go wrong. Your mind starts creating negative scenarios, and your body responds as if those scenarios are real. Your heart rate changes, your muscles tighten, and your stress level increases. So even though nothing has actually happened, you feel anxious. And the worst part is, overthinking often gives you the illusion of control. It makes you feel like you are preparing for the future, like you are reducing risk. But in reality, you are increasing your stress, reducing your clarity, and delaying your actions. You're trying to control uncertainty by thinking more, but uncertainty is still there. So if we put it all together, overthinking doesn't protect you from mistakes. It doesn't guarantee better outcomes. Instead, it quietly takes away your energy, your time, and your ability to act. And maybe the hardest truth to accept is this. Sometimes the biggest risk isn't making the wrong decision, it's staying stuck for too long. In the next part, we're going to look at a belief that keeps this entire cycle alive. The idea that if you just think a little more, you'll finally figure everything out. There is one belief that quietly drives almost all overthinking. It sounds very reasonable, and that's exactly why it's so dangerous. If I just think about this a little more, I'll figure it out. At first, it feels responsible. It feels like you're being careful, thoughtful, even intelligent. But if you slow down and observe what actually happens when you follow that belief, you'll notice something. You don't arrive at clarity. You arrive at more possibilities. Because every time you think deeper, your brain doesn't just find answers, it also creates new questions. What if this goes wrong? But what if that option is better? But what if I'm missing something important? And suddenly, what started as one decision becomes a web of uncertainty. This is the illusion. The idea that more thinking will remove uncertainty, when in reality, it often expands it. And here's something even more important. In many situations in life, clarity does not come from thinking. It comes from movement. You don't fully understand a job until you start doing it. You don't fully understand a relationship until you experience it. You don't fully understand a decision until you live with it for a while. Thinking can prepare you, but it cannot replace experience. So when you keep waiting to feel completely sure before taking action, you are waiting for something that doesn't really exist. And this creates a loop. You don't act because you're not sure. You're not sure because you haven't acted, and the cycle continues. If you look closely, overthinking is often not about finding the best choice. It's about trying to avoid making a wrong one. But avoiding mistakes completely is not a realistic goal. So instead of moving forward, you stay in place, trying to design a perfect outcome in your head. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to take even a small step. So here's a shift that might feel uncomfortable at first, but very freeing once you accept it. You don't need perfect clarity to start. You only need enough clarity to take the next step. And that small difference changes everything. Now, before we talk about stopping overthinking, we need to understand something simple but powerful. You cannot change what you don't notice. Most people try to fight their thoughts directly. They tell themselves to stop thinking, to calm down, or to be more positive. But that usually doesn't work because it treats the thought as something that must be controlled immediately. There's a different approach. Instead of jumping in and reacting to every thought, you learn to step back and observe it. At first, this might feel strange, because when a thought appears, it feels real, it feels important, it feels urgent. But not every thought deserves your attention. Some thoughts are just noise. So one of the simplest techniques you can use is this. When a thought comes up, instead of saying, "This is true," try saying, "I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail." For example, "I'm going to fail this" becomes, "I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail." It's a small change in language, but it creates a small distance between you and the thought. And that distance is powerful, because once you create that space, you are no longer fully inside the loop. You're observing it. Another simple practice is labeling. You notice the pattern and you name it. This is overthinking. This is worry. This is my brain trying to control uncertainty. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to solve it right away. You just need to recognize it. And something interesting happens when you do that consistently. The thoughts don't disappear immediately, but they lose their intensity. They stop pulling you in as strongly as before. Because now, you're not automatically believing everything your mind says. You're starting to see thoughts as events, not facts. And this is the first real breakthrough. Not controlling your mind, but changing your relationship with it. Because once you can see the loop, you are no longer trapped inside it. And from that point, you can finally choose what to do next. You might be wondering, if overthinking is a loop, how do you actually break it? One of the most effective ways is surprisingly simple. You give your brain a different job. Because here's the thing, your brain doesn't like empty space. If you just tell it to stop thinking, it won't listen. It will keep going because that's what it's designed to do. But if you redirect it, things start to change. Instead of asking open-ended questions like, "What should I do? What if this goes wrong?" you shift to something much more concrete. What is one small action I can take right now? That question matters, Because overthinking lives in abstraction, in possibilities, in imagination, in uncertainty. But action lives in reality. Let's say you're overthinking about starting a project. Your mind might go in circles for hours, thinking about the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the possible outcomes. But if you pause and ask, what is one small step I can take in the next 10 minutes? Suddenly, the problem becomes smaller, more manageable. Maybe that step is just opening a document, writing a few lines, sending one message. It doesn't solve everything, but it moves you forward. And once you move, even slightly, something interesting happens. Your mind becomes clearer, because clarity is often the result of action, not the requirement for it. So instead of trying to think your way out of overthinking, you act your way out of it. And no, this doesn't mean you ignore thinking completely. It just means you stop relying on thinking alone. You combine thinking with movement. Another helpful shift is to define the problem more clearly. Overthinking thrives when things are vague. I don't know what to do with my life is too big, too abstract, too heavy. But if you narrow it down, what skill can I improve this month? What opportunity can I explore this week? Now your brain has something specific to work with. It feels less overwhelmed and more focused. So the goal is not to eliminate thinking, it's to guide it, to move from endless analysis to intentional direction. Because once your brain has a clear task, it doesn't need to keep spinning in circles anymore. Now let's go one step further. Even when you understand everything we've talked about, your mind will still try to go back into overthinking sometimes. That's normal. So instead of trying to stop it completely, you set boundaries around it. You decide how much thinking is enough. One simple method is time boxing. You give yourself a fixed amount of time to think about a problem, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. During that time, you think as much as you want. You explore options, consider outcomes, reflect on different perspectives. But when the time is up, you stop and you move to action. At first, this might feel uncomfortable. Your brain will say, wait, I'm not ready yet. I need more time. But if you always wait until you feel ready, you will stay in the loop. So the boundary becomes your support, not your limitation. Another approach is to create simple decision rules. For example, if I have enough information, I decide. If the risk is low, I act quickly. If I'm stuck for too long, I choose one option and move forward. These rules reduce the need to think every situation from the beginning. They give you a structure, and structure reduces mental load. There's also a very practical tool that many people underestimate: writing things down. When thoughts stay in your head, they feel endless. They repeat, they overlap, they become louder. But when you write them down, something changes. You can see them clearly, you can organize them, and most importantly, you can finish them. Because a thought that is written down feels more complete than a thought that is still floating in your mind. So instead of thinking in circles, you move toward closure. And this leads to a powerful idea. Freedom is not about having unlimited time to think. It's about knowing when to stop. When you set limits, you protect your energy, you make space for action, and you teach your brain something new, that it doesn't need to solve everything to move forward. In the next part, we're going to talk about what to do when overthinking feels too strong to control, when it's not just a habit, but something deeper. Let's be honest for a moment. There are times when overthinking feels stronger than you. Not just a habit, but something that pulls you in, almost automatically. You try to stop, but the thoughts keep coming back. And in those moments, the problem is not just your thinking, it's your state. When your body is tense, your mind becomes more active. When your stress level is high, your brain becomes more sensitive to potential threats, even small ones. So if you try to solve overthinking only by thinking differently, it might not be enough. Sometimes you need to change your state first. That can be as simple as moving your body. Go for a short walk, stretch, do something physical. It doesn't sound like a deep solution, but it works because it interrupts the pattern. Your brain cannot stay in the same loop when your body is doing something different. Another approach is to change your environment. If you're sitting in the same place, staring at the same screen, your thoughts tend to follow the same path. But when you step outside or move to a different space, your attention shifts, and that small shift can reduce the intensity of your thoughts. There's also something else that many people don't notice. The more information you consume, the easier it is to overthink. Too many opinions, too many choices, too many possibilities. So sometimes the best thing you can do is reduce input. Stop scrolling, stop searching for more answers, give your mind a break from new information, because overthinking often feeds on excess, not lack. And here's a very important idea. You don't always need to solve the thought. Sometimes you just need to step away from it, let it pass, because not every thought is a problem to fix. Some thoughts are just temporary noise and they fade on their own if you don't hold on to them. So when overthinking feels too strong, don't fight harder. Shift your state, create space, and allow your mind to settle instead of forcing it to be quiet. So let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What does it actually mean to stop overthinking? It doesn't mean your mind becomes empty. It doesn't mean you never worry again. And it definitely doesn't mean you always feel certain. Instead, it means something much simpler and much more realistic. You change how you relate to uncertainty. Because at the core of overthinking is the need to feel in control, to predict outcomes, to avoid mistakes, to make the perfect decision. But people who don't overthink as much are not people with perfect lives. They still face uncertainty. They still make mistakes. The difference is they don't wait for certainty before they act. They accept that some level of doubt will always be there, and they move forward anyway. That shift is subtle but powerful. It turns thinking into a tool instead of a trap. It allows you to use your mind when it's helpful and step away when it's not. And over time, something changes. You trust yourself more, not because you always make the right decision, but because you know you can handle the outcome. So instead of asking, what if this goes wrong? You start asking, if it goes wrong, can I deal with it? And most of the time, the answer is yes. Maybe not perfectly, but well enough. And that is what creates calm, not the absence of problems, but the confidence that you can face them. A calm mind is not a silent mind. It's a mind that knows when to stop. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this episode, it's this. You don't need to eliminate overthinking completely. You just need to recognize when it's happening and gently step out of the loop. Start small. Notice one moment today when you're overthinking something. Pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, do I need more thinking or do I need a small action? That simple question can change more than you expect. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you in the next episode.